Muelrath, and I didn't know she was going to be here. I didn't know I was going to be here. I'm at the Animal Law Conference at the Marriott, speaking in a couple of hours, and Marla invited me down. I came down and saw Lani here, so I just said, you have to let me introduce you. So I'm going to first read her bio here. Lani Muelrath is an award-winning health educator, celebrated speaker, and the author of 3 best-selling books. A longtime vegan advocate and creator of numerous health and wellness courses, Lani is certified in plant-based nutrition, mindfulness meditation instruction, as mind-body specialist, and is a credentialed yoga teacher. She has been featured on CBS TV, ABC TV, Health Magazine, Prevention, USA Today, Huffington Post, and the Saturday Evening Post. She's a presenter for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Complete Health Improvement Program, guest lecturer at San Francisco State University, and associate faculty at Butte College, where one of her books has been adopted as a required text. She's been vegan for 45 years and has been teaching in health and wellness for more than over 4 decades. She's been practicing mindfulness meditation for over 25 years and is recognized as a thought leader and pioneer in transition to plant-based nutrition and the integration of vegan living and mindfulness practice. She is the author of The Mindful Vegan, a 30-day plan for finding health, balance, peace, and happiness, The Plant-Based Journey, and Fit Quickies. So that's her official bio, but I just want to share with you my experience with Lani. I think veganism is really a continuation of what all the great sages and philosophers have talked about. It's about how we can become the most loving human beings possible. Love that extends not only to our neighbors, but to all living beings on this planet. Unfortunately, sometimes vegans struggle with that. The other thing that we were warned against throughout all the great works of spirituality is not to judge. Do not judge. And yet that's what we do all the time. You're not vegan enough, or you're not really vegan, you're just plant-based, or this, that, and the other thing. And it prevents us from being the very vegans that we're supposed to be, which is loving beings, compassionate beings that can extend that emotion towards all living creatures. I don't meet a lot of people in my life that embody this very meaning of veganism, but Lani Muelrath does. She is someone who approaches everybody with caring and compassion and love, listens to them thoughtfully. She takes in everything that other people say and really absorbs the material. She is a fabulous listener. She is a fabulous sharer, and she gives herself to everyone she meets. Lani, you've touched many lives, you've touched mine, and I am so honored to be your friend. And I'm so glad that you're here sharing some of the things that come from your heart. Everyone, ladies and gentlemen, Lani Muelrath.
Well, now I'm supposed to present after that. I didn't even know Miyoko was going to be here. She came by my table and said, "Hey, Lani," and I'm just very moved by that, so thank you so much, Miyoko. And now she's off to speak at the Animal Law Conference, so anyway, I am absolutely delighted to be here today, and I'm delighted that you have chosen to spend this hour with me. And you know, these are kind of difficult times in many ways, aren't they? Just with what's going on in the world, let alone being vegan or aspiring to be vegan in an omnivorous world. We need strength of body and mind for this. We just heard about strength of body from Dr. Kim Williams. How many people were here for Dr. Williams? I think even more importantly is strength and health of mind, because if you can get some degree of mastery over your habits of thinking and some degree of mastery over your reactivity, then you can do anything. I speak a lot about mindfulness, and I like to do it in a way that demystifies it and also brings you some basic tools so that you can experiment for yourself and see if this has some power for you. So before I go any further, I want to ask, is there anyone here, or how many people here have had some kind of exposure to mindfulness meditation? Whether you've read about it or tried it or heard about it. Okay, thank you. And how many people here currently have a mindfulness meditation practice? How many people have a meditation practice of one kind or another? Even if it's yoga, which is the mind-body practice. Thank you. That really helps me to find a little bit about our gathering here today. You know Dr. Melanie Joy, right? Melanie Joy wrote Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. Sometimes I get the animal order mixed up. But she wrote a opening piece for the Mindful Vegan book, which I would like to read to you before we go further. Does that sound okay? She said, mindfulness is probably the most important practice we can ever undertake. The more we are able to be mindful or present, the more we are able to feel authentically connected with ourselves and others. The ability to be present is at the heart of all healthy relationships with other humans, with non-human beings, with the planet, and with ourselves. When we are present, we relate to all aspects of our lives, including our eating habits, with greater awareness, compassion, and health. Dr. Melanie Joy. Your mind is what your brain does. And with mindfulness practice, we do little things with our mind that can make big changes in your brain and your experience of living. So let me bring that down to earth. How can something that's a simple mental practice change our experience of living? Let me give you an example. Or let me ask you, has anyone here ever aspired to a new healthy eating plan, got all gung-ho, and then 2 weeks or 2 days or 2 hours later, it just kind of fell apart? Or has anyone here ever aspired to a healthy exercise plan? And 2 weeks or 2 days or 2 hours later, it fell apart? Let me try something even more. I want to bring it into the minute. Has anyone here ever experienced or ever known anyone who has experienced stress eating? Has anyone here ever experienced or known someone who's experienced mindless snacking? Or have you ever seen someone, I know it's probably not you, but they get cut off in traffic and they just start yelling at the other drivers? Have you ever known someone like that? All right, well, these are all examples of reactivity. And this is where mindfulness practice can make a difference, and not just through willpower. This is the opening quote to my book, The Mindful Vegan. Between stimulus and a response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. You may be familiar with this very eloquent quote from Viktor Frankl. All of the things I just described to you are examples of reactivity. That means habituated responses that have become reactivities for us that really are the cause of our most of our misery of our days, right? We like to think it's the big things, but these are the things that plague us day by day and bring us down and make us unwell, and also take our resiliency bottomed. So what happens is with mindfulness practice, this space, don't we all know that space? You know when someone, you know what they're going to say, and you start getting, and then they say it, and you're right there? Do you know what I'm talking about? Maybe that's just me. What happens is with mindfulness practice, you actually learn how to grow that space between the stimulus and your habituated reaction to it. This gives you skills for living more skillfully. Wouldn't this be something if we could not just fall into those same painful traps over and over again? Instead of just resolving, I'm never going to do that one again, and then it happens again, what if there were a way to navigate out of it? And that is exactly what mindfulness practice does. So what is this? Does everyone recognize? The canary in the coal mine? You all know that phrase, right? Canary in the coal mine is that which is kind of your sensitive point where you may have reactivity. And I mentioned a lot of food situations, stress eating, mindless snacking, because that was the canary in my coal mine. For 30 years, I struggled with my relationship with food, eating in my body, my weight. I was either, planning the next diet or making up for the last one. And no matter how I resolved, no matter how much I knew, I have an advanced degree in kinesiology. I have plant-based nutrition. I studied nutrition, but knowing all that didn't help me put it all together. Have you ever had that disconnect? You know what to do, but then, it just doesn't quite come to fruition. Well, 25 years ago, I took up a mindfulness practice because at that point, I decided I just wanted to reestablish a healthy, happy relationship with food, eating in my body. That's really what I wanted. I wanted freedom around food and living that wasn't so tied into that little knot. That was my coal mine. That was the canary in my coal mine. Other canaries can be obsession with either like a diet or exercise. Maybe you know someone who's like a workaholic, and that's the same as productive at work. People who take kind of refuge in always being wedded to that next thing on the project. Maybe you know someone who, or have seen people who are kind of addicted to zoning out online or addicted to some other substance. All of these are ways that we poor dear human beings, these honorable souls, are dealing with the ups and downs of life in the best ways we know how, which is reactivity that we've done over and over again. Does that make sense? So this is what we're going to talk about today. This is the meaning of life is this way, cheese and crackers. Of course, it's Miyoko's cheese, right? That we're talking about. But this is what we're going to talk about, is how can mindfulness practice help you navigate these ups and downs of life more skillfully, and so that you can have better result every day with the choices that you make and live more masterfully. If you could get some degree of mastery over your habits of thinking, wouldn't that be everything? When you think about it, that's behind everything. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research. My personal story, I've already told you a little bit, and that will keep coming up through our talk together. I have a short video to show you of Anderson Cooper going to mindfulness camp, which is really good. It shows him, he hooks up to electrodes, and it shows what's happening in his brain while he is doing meditation. So that's kind of fun. And hopefully time for Q&A. And I also will do at least 1 minute of practice with you. I'll teach you the steps that I teach in the Mindful Vegan. And by the way, there was a huge box of copies of this book, as well as the Plant-Based Journey, that were here last night, and they're nowhere to be found now. So if you want a signed copy today, Stacy's in back with the last 3 I have, and here's a 4th one, unless the box of books uncovers itself. So that's just how it unfolded today. So, sound like a good plan going forward? Okay, look at it this way. If you can be at ease in any situation, if you can be calm and relaxed in rush hour traffic, if you can arrive home at the end of a busy day and just settle into a relaxed routine, if you can love everyone unconditionally, then you are probably a dog. Right? My point here is that mindfulness practice does not give you a trouble-free life. It gives you tools with which to navigate life's ups and downs. So let's go to, I like to throw in humor. I want to learn to live in the moment, just not this moment, some other moment, like a moment on the beach. So let's go back to the dog. Can you see the pictures over there? Don't we know this to be true? Okay, they're sitting on the bench looking at the pond. What's the dog doing? Sitting, looking at the pond. What's the human doing? Over and over, madness. These are the things that give us a lot of misery. But actually, it's more like this. Have you ever had a day or a week like this? Multitasking, by the way, you probably know there's no such thing. It's just doing a lot of things poorly. You kind of jump, your mind can't do all of them at once. It just jumps from one thing to another. But you know what's interesting is they have discovered, and I'm just about to share the research with you, that even though we are multitasking and doing many things, that our minds are wandering a lot of the time. So I'm going to tell you about that and then explain to you why that might not be to your best advantage. So here he is. You are here, but your mind is somewhere else. In 2010, at Harvard University, a research study was undertaken. And the purpose of the study was to find out if there was any kind of connection between wandering mind, and we all know what that is, right? You know how you find, how did I get there? And it's kind of like a Google search in your brain, and you end up somewhere else, or you can't get something out of your head. They wanted to find out what's the correlation between that and happiness. How would you research for that? How would you test that? I'll explain to you how they did it. All right, they had over 5,000 subjects in the study. And each of the subjects was given a phone with an app. And the app would ping them several times during the day. And they had to answer 3 questions. Here's the 3 questions. Number 1, what are you doing? Number 2, what are you thinking about? And number 3 was, what's your mood or how happy are you feeling? So what are you doing? What are you thinking about? How happy are you feeling right now? The subjects were aged 18 to 83, over 80 different occupations from countries all over the world. They had more than 500,000 responses, so they had some good solid data to go on. They came up with 2 primary findings. Number 1, 50% of the time, our minds are wandering. So where are you right now, by the way? I'm not going to call anyone, but see, we know what that means, don't we? Half the time our minds are wandering. That means a big chunk of time, my friends, we're not doing what we're doing while we're doing it. We're off somewhere else. And we'll talk about why that might be problematic in a little bit. That was one of the results. And the other result is they found this. Across the board, here we have guy at computer fantasizing about superhero. Lady at computer fantasizing on the beach, a guy at the computer, guy at the computer. Across the board, that we are happier when we're doing what we're doing while we're doing it than if our mind's off somewhere else, even if it's something we don't like doing. So that means, let's say you're doing the dishes, and you don't like doing the dishes, and you think, well, I'll just fantasize about last summer in Italy, or maybe, next summer in Hawaii, thinking that will improve your mood. You're actually happier if you're just present. It doesn't mean you have to learn to love doing the dishes. It just means you're engaged, your body's there, and your mind's kind of there instead of off wandering. Across the board, happier if we're doing what we're doing while we're doing it. And in a minute, I'll explain to you what's happening in our brain to explain that. There are thousands of research studies now on mindfulness and its power for not only creating happier lives, but reducing stress, relieving disease, pain management, relieving addictions. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Cravings. Thousands of research studies, and it's now used in hundreds of hospitals around the world for this very reason. And I'm sure a lot of people have done some of the readings related to that. So here the upshot of the study, and you can look this up online. It's called "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." That's the name of the study. By the way, everything I'm telling you today is in the Mindful Vegan book. I'm a kind of an academic, so I like to support things with research, so you'll find all these references there. First, the ability to think about what is not happening is a cognitive achievement that comes at an emotional cost. Now let's find out why this might be a problem, this unleashed wandering mind. Through our daily life, if we have not even a clue about when our minds are wandering or not, or how to stop it, or how to have some kind of mastery over it, it's very easy for us to become involved in what's called excessive rumination. Isn't that kind of self-explanatory? Excessive rumination. You can't get something out of your head. You can't stop thinking about it. Does that sound familiar? Anyone, maybe you haven't had that experience? That's called excessive rumination. And here's what happens. This is an upshot, can be an upshot of wandering mind. This actually leads you into parts of your brain, hooking neural activity, where also reside sadness, depression, cravings, anxiety, addiction, all the fun stuff. So what happens is you're actually moving into a part of the cortex of the brain where those reside by becoming involved in out-of-control wandering mind. So maybe someday when you're sad, it's not just because something sad happened, but maybe it was too much time zoning out online. You know how it just goes from one thing to another? Have you ever felt sad after doing that? It's just kind of depleting. Anyway, the research shows us what's happening in our brains. So mindfulness practices, they keep your mind from being lost in the past or future by bringing you into more the present moment. And it counteracts automaticity and reactivity by pulling you out of the default mode network into present moment experience. Default mode network is what neurologists call that wandering mind state where we just default to if we don't have some kind of practice that keeps us more present oriented. Does that make sense? It's the default. We found this in your brain. Have you ever seen those toys? You know, the monkeys with the... Okay, I want to make a point here. This wandering mind is actually a positive evolutionary development. If we had not been poised to kind of see what's going on around us, we wouldn't have survived to this long. So don't think that wandering mind is, bad evolution. The problem is it's kind of run amok. And if we don't have some degree of mastery over it, it can, as we've already discovered, create some problems for us. So how are we doing? Does that make sense? All right. Oh, all right. First I wanted to show you, there's so much research, but I have the most dramatic demonstration of mindfulness practice and how it can affect one of our most insidious behaviors of our society, of our world, and that's addiction to cigarette smoking. We can all agree that's an addiction, right? Would you think that mindfulness might be able to have some kind of an effect on an addiction other than stress reduction? This research was done out of Yale a few years ago, and several have been repeated since. And what they wanted to do was find out the difference between smoking cessation success, stopping smoking, and two programs. One, the Freedom from Smoking program that is the gold standard of the American Lung Association. This is like a behavior modification, avoid triggers, get support, go to group meetings, those kinds of things. That was one. And the other was mindfulness training. So they split these people into two groups. One group they tracked through the Freedom from Smoking program, the other through mindfulness training, of which we're going to do a little bit together in a few minutes. After 17 weeks post-treatment, which do you think of these was most effective? Doesn't it seem like the usual, the gold standard would win out? Well, what happened is at the end of the training, and this is where I had the graph that I had up and took away real quick. At the end of the treatment, mindfulness training was, as you can see, more than twice as effective at smoking cessation than the Freedom from Smoking program. And here's 17 weeks post-treatment. Now keep in mind, everybody entered in the program had to be smoking at least 20 cigarettes a day, and they wanted to have the desire to stop smoking. So one group went through the behavior modification, one group went through mindfulness training. So do you want to know how that... This is why it's so dramatic. Okay. Now don't be frightened that it's a big chart. I'll explain it to you. This is actually a graphic from a smoking cessation program with mindfulness training that shows the craving cycle. positive cue, neutral cue, and negative cue. Those are the only kind of 3 cues for any kind of response to anything. It's either positive, negative, or neutral, right? So examples might be a positive cue, having a good meal or sex connected with cigarette smoking. Neutral cue, get in your car. You know how people who smoke, maybe some here, there's an automatic response. You do something and you pull out a cigarette. Or there's a negative cue, get yelled at by your boss, a stress response to that. What happens then is the craving is inspired, either through positive or negative. Smoking is undertaken, and the craving cycle continues. So here's how the Freedom from Smoking or behavior modification program would work. And if you're not a smoker, I'd like you to apply it to some behavior that you think maybe you would like to modify. This has become automated, the smoke reaction. So the Freedom from Smoking program says, well, we will just stop the triggers, avoid the cues. That makes sense, right? Okay, so let's never have a good meal or sex. Let's never get in the car, and heaven forbid you ever have a fight with your boss, or anybody for that matter. So it may be nice to kind of engineer these a little bit out of your life, but this is life, isn't it? How do we not have these stimuluses? Then what happens, once the craving starts, according to behavior modification and Freedom from Smoking program, they'll substitute behaviors like eat carrots or sunflower seeds or cookies or something. And these might be healthier for you than smoking, true. But the problem is, it has not stopped the cycle. It keeps the craving cycle going. So there we have the overview. See, it wasn't that scary a graphic after all. Now let's look at what the mindfulness approach is. With mindfulness, we seek to, or aspire to, be with life as it is and navigate it more skillfully. So it's, even though maybe you can engineer some of the things out of your life that might be stressors, we know that we can't avoid them. Can we find a better way to navigate them? With the cigarette smokers, they learned this. When a craving arose, they became trained in actually using mindfulness tools to navigate that training. With mindfulness practice, you are not only focusing on what's happening with your wandering mind and bringing it back to the present, but you are also become more acquainted with the sensations in your body that are giving you information about your emotions. Craving is an emotion, even though it may be connected to a physical substance. So they were actually trained not only to the mindfulness meditation practice and how to live more mindfully through their day, but how to be present with the discomfort of craving until, guess what? It dissolved. Not pushing it away, ignoring it, not diving it into it, but being present with that discomfort. That was the key. So what happens then is it stopped the craving cycle. There's also, I want to move on in our interests of time, this has also been done with binge eating. It's been done with other kinds of addictions, all kinds of behaviors now where mindfulness practice, if someone engages with the activities where it's successful at stopping these negative cycles. And we're not talking about a whole ton. The smokers, for example, were committed to 15 to 20 minutes of silent meditation practice, like we're going to do together for about 5 or 6 days a week. And they also were tasked with how to transfer that into their daily activities, meaning how can you more often be with what you're doing while you're doing it? If we just let our minds wander aimlessly all day long and try for a few minutes not to do that, it's harder than if you bring that into the rest of your day. So I would like to do a little bit of practice with you. Sound good? What I'm going to do is take you through the 4 steps for setting up mindfulness practice as I teach it. And it's very simple. You know, I taught 6th grade for 20 years too. So I'm kind of skilled in what it's like to take a challenge and break it down. Do I have any other teachers in here? See, I love you. I mean, I love everyone, but you know, teachers. How to take a complex skill and break it down into little pieces. And that's why I wrote this as a 30-day plan. Because I didn't want it to be like So I'm going to go, oh, this sounds like a great idea. Someday I'll do that. I start one day with 1 minute, day 2 with 2 minutes, step by step. So invite you in a friendly way. So I put this picture up because this may be in our minds what we think of when we think of meditation, when in actuality it's more like this. People will come to me and they say, you know, I tried that meditation thing and I sat down and my mind just went crazy. It was all over the place. Well, here's the thing, my friends. That's because that's what our minds are doing all the time. We're just not aware of it until we sit down and check in with what's going on. So let me take this off so it doesn't drive you crazy. This is a quote from the book. Meditation is about befriending your thinking, holding it gently in awareness and letting go of thoughts rather than shutting them off or changing them. So let's start there. I want to get a chair so I can sit with you. We're going to do this in 2 stages. Before I teach you those 4 steps, just be comfortable however you like. And then I'll give you a seating position. But I want to play with this mind being lost in the present and lost in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 minute and we're going to close our eyes, and I want you to just spend that 1 minute. Every time a thought of the past comes up, drop it and come back to the present. And every time something about the future, what you're going to have for lunch, what you're going to do tonight, what's happening next week, drop it and just be here. Okay? Instructions clear? All right? And so we begin. Keep dropping those thoughts just like suitcases and come back to present, sitting in this chair, in this room. And slowly take in a breath and open your eyes. Any questions or comments on that? How'd it go? Were you able to drop everything? All right, you know what makes it easier is if you have something for your attention to be upon while you're doing that. And that's the purpose of setting up the formal practices. We're just about to do it. I told you there's 4 steps. And I have an acronym for them that spells PAIR: position, anchor, intention, and remindfulness. For position, what you want to have is have your feet flat on the floor, seat yourself up into an erect yet dignified and relaxed position, so it's not like a slouch back in the chair. You can also be seated on the cushion on the floor, and many people think that's how it has to be, but in our culture, a lot of times we sit on chairs, so that it really doesn't matter. Have your feet flat on the floor, and you can have your hands folded on your lap. I like to place them on the tops of my thighs because it helps support posture, and it's also something I don't do. I don't sit watching a movie with my hands like this on my thighs, but it helps keep you attentive and keep your spine up. So that's position and closed eyes. We'll go there in a minute. Anchor, didn't you find that when you're trying to drop the present and you're trying to drop the future, well, where do I go? How do I bring myself into the present? Well, that's the purpose of focusing on the feeling of the breath. The breath takes place in the present moment. You can't breathe for tomorrow. You can't breathe for yesterday. It's right here, right now. And that's why it is used for this practice of concentration. It's also something we can take anywhere. We're all doing it, right? So the anchor is at the breath, and you want to feel the breath. It's not thinking about it or picturing it. It's feeling, because feeling takes place in the present moment. Position and anchor. Intention, I stands for intention. That means we're going to set an intention to sit together for a certain period of time. We're going to take another minute, okay? Because if you just say, well, I'll do this for a while, you know, how easy it is for that, because our minds want to wander. It's not fun to not do that anymore. It's not fun to train that. It takes some effort. But here's where the other half of intention comes in. Your intention is to sit for a specific period of time, today 1 minute, with kindness, patience, and an open heart. If you come at it with a military approach and get down on yourself like, there I go again, I'll never get this down, you're practicing judgment. You're practicing reactivity. So that's part of it. You're cultivating compassion and self-care. And then R stands for remindfulness. That's a word I made up that stands for every time you remember what you're trying to do here, you return to the anchor point and just repeat that over and over again. That's all this is. It doesn't matter if your mind has wandered 500 times. It's the effort, the brain training of bringing it back that makes a difference. So you ready to try a minute of this together? And then we'll see a video, okay? Position, elevated, erect yet dignified. Close your eyes. Anchor is at the breath, wherever you feel it most dominant. If it's at the nose, the chest, the belly, for today it doesn't matter. Intention for 1 minute, and remindfulness every time you remember what you're trying to do here, bring your attention back. And so we begin. Where are you now? Keep coming back to the breath. And then slowly take another breath in. Open your eyes. Anyone want to share out about their experience? How was that? Relaxing? Agitating? Yeah. Go ahead.
No, how you said your mind wanders to the future or past. What about problem solving? My mind finds a problem and try to solve it all the time. It finds a different problem if I was able to solve it.
Problem solving. He's talking about problem solving. Where'd you find those?
I don't want to talk right now. So books will be at Lani's booth.
Yeah, I'm at table 25. Or I can actually do right here, since... Hey, yeah, 25. Wow, well done.
Should we do it at the booth?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
25. Thank you. Hey, what's your name?
Good thing you checked your trunk.
Shaquille. Shaq had the question about what about your problem solving, and I'm so glad you asked that question, because a wandering mind and problem solving are two different things. Problem solving is concentration. You're targeted and focused on a project. That's not the same as your mind jumping from one thing to another and lost in fantasy. So, does that answer the question? Yeah. Like this, going to the past or going to the future, we have to do that when we're reflecting on things that we've done in the past that we would like to improve or that we did well. But that's a different use of your brain rather than just whatever comes down the pike. The same thing with planning for the future. You have to plan for your holiday. You have to plan for the job interview. Those are concentration. They're not just wandering mind. The problem may be coming, though, is if you get lost in thought and then you find a problem and you're trying to do your mental practice. So the formal practice is designed to help us have some degree of mastery over that. Now I'm going to think on problem solving. It's not going to... Usually we're just at the mercy of what comes into our mind, aren't we? Whether it's a task or just wandering aimlessly. Did that answer? Yeah, he says problem solving can be stressful if you're solving one thing after another. That's correct. And that's why you would want to get some degree of mastery over that. Can we get to a point where we'll go, okay, I'm going to deal with this problem now. The next one comes up. You can get to a place where in your brain you can go, tomorrow at 4 o'clock we'll address that. And it takes work to learn how to extract that, but you can actually do that. All right, so let's watch the video I was going to show to you. Here's Anderson Cooper. He's going to hook up to electrodes.
Our lives are filled with distractions. Email, Twitter, texting. We're constantly connected to technology, rarely alone with just our thoughts, which is probably why there's a growing movement in America to train people to get around the stresses of daily life. It's a practice called mindfulness, and it basically means being aware of your thoughts, physical sensations, and surroundings. Tonight, we'll introduce you to the man who's largely responsible for mindfulness gaining traction. His name is Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he thinks mindfulness is the answer for people who are so overwhelmed by life, they feel they aren't really living at all.
There are a lot of different ways to talk about mindfulness, but what it really means is awareness.
Is it being present?
It is being present. That's exactly what it is.
I don't feel I'm very present in each moment. I feel like every moment I'm either thinking about something that's coming down the road or something that's been in the past.
So ultimately, all this preparing is for what? For the next moment, like the last moment, and then we're dead. So in a certain way, are we going to experience while we're still alive? We're only alive now.
Jon Kabat-Zinn is an MIT-trained scientist who's been practicing mindfulness for 47 years. Back in 1979, he started teaching mindfulness through meditation to people suffering from chronic pain and illness. That program is now used in more than 700 hospitals worldwide. So how can you be mindful in your daily life?
When your alarm goes off and you jump out of bed, what is the nature of the mind in that moment? Are you already like, oh my God, your calendar pops into your mind and you're driven already? Or can you take a moment and just lie in bed and just feel your body breathing and remember, oh yeah, brand new day and I'm still alive. So I get out of bed with awareness, brush my teeth with awareness. When you're in the shower, next time check and see if you're in the shower.
What do you mean check and see if you're in the shower?
Well, you may not be. You may be in your first meeting at work. You may have 50 people in the shower with you.
Kabat-Zinn says mindfulness takes practice. A lot of people start with a training class to learn how to meditate. He agreed to teach us at a weekend retreat on a remote mountaintop in Northern California. When we arrived, we were told there'd be no television to watch, no internet, not even an alarm clock.
So I'm checking in.
The retreat was full of professionals, neuroscientists, business leaders, Silicon Valley executives. Before we began, we all had to surrender our last ties to the outside world.
Put your devices in the basket, you know. I'm contributing my MacBook Air and my iPhone, happily.
I wasn't exactly happy to give up my phone. I usually check emails several times an hour.
So let's take a few minutes and just settle into an erect and dignified posture.
The retreat lasted 3 days, and most of that time was spent just sitting there, silently meditating, with occasional guidance from Kabat-Zinn.
There's no place to go. There's nothing to do. We're just asking you to sit and know that you're sitting.
Knowing that you're sitting may sound simple. Turns out it's not. The mind constantly wanders.
The mind has a life of its own. It goes here and there.
To not get lost in thought, Kabat-Zinn recommended focusing on the sensation of breathing in and out.
Can we actually ride with full awareness on the waves of the breath at the belly, at the nostrils, and the chest, and then simply rest here in awareness?
Resting in awareness is one of those phrases used a lot by people who practice mindfulness. But when I tried to do it, it wasn't restful, and I worried I wasn't doing it right. I kept thinking about work. I miss my cell phone.
You're not alone.
Having a little withdrawal, I will say. Kabat-Zinn, who's written 10 books on mindfulness and led nearly 100 retreats, describes meditation as a mental workout.
The mind wanders away from the breath, and then you gently and non-judgmentally just bring it back.
So it's okay that the mind drifts away, but you just bring it back.
It's the nature of the mind to drift away. The mind is like the Pacific Ocean. It waves. And mindfulness has been shown to drop underneath the waves. If you drop underneath the agitation in the mind into your breath, deep enough, calmness, gentle undulations.
After hours of meditating and 30-minute sessions, it does get easier. Those waves of thought Kabat-Zinn described, they're still there, but you get less distracted by them. At breakfast, we spent time relearning some of the very basic things in life, including how to eat food. Eating a meal in complete silence is a little awkward, but without conversation as a distraction, you taste more and eat less. This is something called walking meditation. The goal is to learn to be aware of each and every movement and feeling. I know it seems ridiculous, but it does change the way you experience walking.
The Zen people from ancient China, when you're walking, just walk. Turns out to be the hardest thing.
That's
when
an
you're
ancient
walking,
saying.
just walk. When you're eating, just eat. Not from the TV, not with the newspaper. Turns out that's huge.
Congressman Tim Ryan, an Ohio Democrat, says mindfulness might look a lot like nothing, but he really believes it can change America for the better. He attended his first meditation retreat in 2008, just days after winning a grueling re-election campaign. But being mindful at a retreat is one thing. We wondered if back in Washington, Congressman Ryan ever worries about how all this looks.
Well, you know, I can see myself in high school going, whoa, stay away from those guys.
So how do you use it here on Capitol Hill?
I'm on the budget committee, for example. There's a lot of conflict, and people say things that get you ramped up. I find myself, as my body clenches up when somebody says something that I know is wrong, or I want to catch them in a lie, or whatever, that just calm down. When it's your turn, you make your point. Hey, man.
You don't hear the words calm and Congress together very often, but Ryan is trying to change that. He hosts weekly meditation sessions open to members and staff of both parties.
Now shifting the attention to take in the entire body.
Have you gotten any Republican congressmen in to meditate with you yet?
No. We're working on it.
He's written a book about mindfulness and obtained $1 million of federal funding to teach it to school children in his Ohio district.
Yeah, like we're calm right now.
Yes, you are. I've seen it transform classrooms. I've seen it heal veterans. I've seen what it does to individuals who have really high chronic levels of stress and how it has helped their body heal itself. I wouldn't be willing to stick my neck out this far if I didn't think this is the thing that can really help shift the country.
To some people, though, this may sound like kind of new age gobbledygook.
There's so many different compelling studies that are showing that this is not New Age gobbledygook. This is potentially transformative of our health and well-being psychologically as well as physically. It can be useful for anxiety, depression, stress reduction.
There have been a number of studies that show mindfulness can lead to those benefits, as well as improvements in memory and attention. And at the University of Massachusetts, Judson Brewer, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, uses mindfulness to treat addiction.
This is just the next generation of exercise. We've got the physical, exercise components down, and now it's about working out how can we actually train our minds.
Dr. Brewer is trying to understand how mindfulness can alter the functioning of the brain. He uses a cap lined with 128 electrodes.
We're going to start filling each of these 128 wells with conduction gel.
The electrodes are able to pick up signals from the posterior cingulate, part of a brain network linked to memory and emotion.
This is all just picking up electrical signal from the top of your head.
Since attending the mindfulness retreat, I'd been meditating daily and was curious to see if it had an impact on my brain.
We're going to have you start with thinking of something that was very anxiety-provoking for you.
Okay. When I thought about something stressful, the cells in my brain's posterior cingulate immediately started firing, shown by the red lines that went off the chart on the computer screen.
Just drop into meditation.
Okay. When I let go of those stressful thoughts and refocused on my breath, within seconds, the brain cells that had been firing quieted down, shown by the blue lines on the computer.
That's really fascinating to see like that.
Dr. Brewer believes everyone can train their brains to reach that blue mindfulness zone, but he says all the technology we're surrounded by makes it difficult.
If you look at people out on the street, if you look at people at restaurants, nobody's having conversations anymore. They're sitting at dinner looking at their phone because their brain is so addicted to it.
You really think there's something in the brain that's addicted to that?
Well, it's the same reward pathways as addiction, absolutely.
I'm, on mobile devices all day long, and I feel like I could go through an entire day and not be present.
And what's that like?
It's exhausting.
Yeah. So all of this is leading to a societal exhaustion.
The irony is many of the people responsible for creating the gadgets that distract us are themselves practicing mindfulness. More than 2,000 people from companies like Google, Facebook, and Instagram showed up earlier this year in San Francisco for a mindfulness conference called Wisdom 2.0.
Please welcome our guests.
Karen May is a Google vice president, and that's Chade Main-Tun, a former engineer who's become kind of a mindfulness guru. As could only happen at a place like Google, his actual title is Jolly Good Fellow.
Which nobody can deny.
So what does a Jolly Good Fellow do?
My job description is to enlighten minds, open hearts, and create world peace.
That's your job description?
That's my job description.
I've heard that at some meetings at Google, you actually start out with moments of silence.
We do.
How long do you sit there quietly for?
It's literally a minute or two of noticing your breathing, calming yourself down, being present, and then you're able to go into the meeting, the business at hand, with a little bit more focus.
Does it make people more productive?
Yes, it does. When the mind is unagitated, when the mind is calm, that mind is most conducive to creative problem solving.
To innovate.
Correct. And one of the powers of mindfulness is the ability to get to that frame of mind on demand.
So, along with their free health clubs and other company perks, Google now offers their 52,000 employees free lessons in mindfulness.
In the middle of stress, when everything's falling apart, you can take one breath.
I can imagine some people rolling their eyes and saying, oh, come on, of course, Google, you guys have tons of money, and there's massage therapists walking around and all sorts of nice things for employees, but it just doesn't seem practical.
The advantage of this is it actually doesn't cost anything and it doesn't take much time.
And you believe it really works?
I absolutely believe it works.
After nearly 4 decades of teaching mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn is happy to see it hitting the mainstream. But if you're starting to think mindfulness is something you should start practicing, he says you may be missing the point.
It's not a big should. It's not like, oh, I got to now one more thing that I have to put in my life. Now I have to be mindful,
And if it becomes that one more thing they got to do after they take the yoga class.
Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's not a doing at all. In fact, it's a being, and being doesn't take any time.
Anderson Cooper tells how mindfulness changed his life. Go to 60minutesovertime.com.
I really want to thank Marla Rose and John for bringing this mindfulness connection to this. Because those of us who are trying to make a difference with living more consciously, with what we eat, with what we wear, with all of those elements, have come up against some stresses in our lives. Have you? Have you had difficult conversations? This can help you navigate those more carefully, more easily, with greater ease and with greater compassion, so that you can actually embody the ethics that you are seeking to advance. This has made a tremendous difference for me. I told you about my the food and eating connection. Once mindfulness came into my life, I ended up dropping like 40 pounds that never came back. That was 25 years ago. And I'm not advancing this as a weight loss method. I'm advancing it as a way of getting beneath your disquieting states and living more happily and successfully. This has the same impact with your conversations in the world about your lifestyle choices. If Miyoko mentioned that a little bit in her presentation, if we can actually learn to be present with the people we are speaking with, make a connection with them instead of seeing them as an obstacle to our project or our agenda, it makes a world of difference. You can win hearts through love and compassion more than you can by shaming and blaming. So thank you, Marla Rose and John, for that. And since we're so packed up, we have time for 2 questions, and then I'm here the rest of the day with my books that I'll answer anybody's questions. And I'll be going downstairs after this to the book table. Is there someone else? Booth 25. Is there someone who would like to have a, yeah. What's my opinion about caffeine? I drink coffee every morning. I found that if I have too much, I'm not sure what the connection with mindfulness is, except maybe if I have too much, it keeps me up at night, and sleep is very important. So I, just have a little bit. But my belief about caffeine is the research says there's more positives about it than negatives about it for, cognitive ability and certain kinds of cancer. But it depends. If it keeps you from sleeping, sleeping is utmost important. Does it fuel the thinking? No, actually, maybe if you have too much. He's wondering if it fuels the wandering mind. It can also, caffeine is known to help us create focus. So, no, this is not a prescription. I'm not telling everyone you got to take up coffee with this, but I'm just answering the question. I hope that answered. Yes.
What is your meditation practice?
She asked what my daily schedule? Usually in the mornings, about 45 minutes. And I'll try to do another session later in the day. It's very good to have a practice of 5-10 minutes. If that's all you can do, this is better than nothing. And if you can be more mindful through the day, you know what I have, and I wanted to share with you, but we don't have the time, is some really quick things you can do during the course of the day to bring yourself back to mindfulness. Notice your breath, feel your feet, just bring yourself here, and this will help curtail this habit of wandering mind. But I cannot advise more strongly than to have some kind of a formal practice that has you connect with that every day so that you can reach it into the rest of your life. So I think there we have it. I think that's our time. And thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So I'll be downstairs at booth 25. And Stacy here has a few books right here if you want to grab one of the last 3 upstairs. Thank you.